Day 3 that we have been here looking at the results. Wednesday was voting from yesterday. Yesterday things began to take shape. This is the national picture tonight. The ANC, 4.5 million of the votes in the bag. The DA, 2.4 million. MK Party still in third position at 1.4 million. The EFF in the last half an hour or so managed to get up above a million. There they are. Only 4 parties sitting at over a million. Action SA, by the way, have climbed quite a bit from yesterday. They're now sitting at around 120,000. When we spoke yesterday, they were barely past the 35,000 mark. Shiluba, Bongani Baloyi, former DA mayor in Midvaal, they're not doing well at all. 1,633 votes is what they've got. The UDM, led by Bantu Holomisa, they don't have a resounding success either because they've got, let's look at the UDM, about 59,000 votes so far. The Freedom Front Plus, Vryheids Front, they've got 158,000 of the votes. Let's cast our eyes to KwaZulu-Natal because a lot of interesting things are happening in KZN. You've got the MK Party, new political players. They look like they're headed towards the 1 million mark in KZN. They're sitting at around 891,000, if I'm seeing that correctly, in KwaZulu-Natal. I just want to see the ANC. It's sitting at about 370,000 in KZN. And then if you look at the DA, 252,000. The EFF suffering massive losses in KwaZulu-Natal as far as results that we have so far. Very important to highlight that these are not the final results, but the EFF sitting at 45 or 46,000. 46,000, I think that is. And then the list goes on and on. But for all intents and purposes, the MK Party appears to have done a clean sweep of things when you look at KwaZulu-Natal. Let's bring in the party spokesperson, Mr. Nhlamulo Ndhlela. Nhlamulo, good evening. How are you?
Good evening.
All smiles, I see, from your camp.
Well, should we say smirks for now?
Better than expected performance?
Indeed. Much better than expected. But again, you know, the VDs that have come in terms of the numbers that we're seeing, is based on the smaller VDs. That's why you saw DA, shoot through, because most of them are the smaller VDs. Mm-hmm. The bigger VDs are now coming in a form of specifically, let's say, KZN itself. Mm-hmm. The Zululand, all the other further outskirts regions, those are now coming in. And that's going to have an impact. There's no doubt on that number that you see in KZN.
How much higher do you think you're going to go in KZN?
Look,
you're at about 800,000, I think, now?
Yes, correct. But there's no reason why we should not be hitting above 55% in KZN. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. Because we know,
My math is terrible. What is this in percentage terms? Are you past 50?
We were at 48, somewhere around there.
So you might have to go to a coalition.
We'll see.
If you don't hit 51,
no, we'll see.
You're going into a coalition?
We'll see.
Are you ready for the possibility?
Well, naturally, if you find yourself in a situation where you have to have those kind of discussions, you ought to have them. But, when we engage, and this is our position, first and foremost, with any party that we engage in coalition discussion or negotiations with, one of the first questions we're going to ask is, do you want to change the constitution? Do you agree? Are you aligned to that first?
To what extent becomes the question, right?
Yes, to what extent, but naturally, But here's the reality.
What is your non-compromise? When you talk about constitutional change, what do you want to change specifically as a non-negotiable?
Exactly, but here's the reality. We have issues related to the Irrigation Act, where a person has been given rights to the whole Jozini Dam. No one can touch that water. Mm-hmm. It's not even his ancestral land. And this was issued during apartheid, right? We want to institute in this new dispensation water reforms, only to find that this person takes us to court. Guess what protects him? The evergreen contract being in the Constitution. So this Constitution has been prepared and set for specific people and protects them. So you can't institute the kind of service delivery that you want organically for our people without changing this Constitution. Because, a lot of what we want to do does hinge on the Constitution.
So you'd have to play a smarter game at national level?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that.
So are you willing to go into coalition with the ANC?
ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa?
What do you mean? Are you saying you want an ANC that gets rid of Cyril Ramaphosa?
We'll engage in discussion with the ANC. But I don't see us sitting across the ANC of Ramaphosa.
Well, that's who the party has elected.
Oh, well, then it's not. Then in that case, the ANC of Ramaphosa doesn't want to negotiate with us.
Also, the ANC doesn't necessarily need you. They've got the option of the EFF. They've got the action of the DA.
Well,
so it's not guaranteed that you'll be
well, then it would be
the
interesting.
kingmaker.
It would be interesting to see if they'll actually even get into bed with the DA. Very
But you realize that.
But let them go ahead.
But you realize that they've got other options where they can make it happen without giving up their leader.
Well, they realize the situation that we also there. They can't just make decisions. In actual fact, who says that the EFF doesn't want to speak to us already, or is not speaking to us?
But
Who says that the IFP is not speaking to us?
The point is, though, they've got a shorter route to a coalition than you would.
No, let them with the DA.
They could.
Well, let them go with the DA.
And so my point is, this is negotiation. So the point I'm trying to make here, Nhlamulo, is, unfortunately, there are things that you're just not going to get, especially from a party that's already got about 42%. And I think it's fair to assume that sacking their leader, who was elected by conference, would be a bridge too far.
Well, it's fair to say that they're in this position because of the same leader. Fact.
Would you sack Jacob Zuma for the sake of a coalition?
How can we sack a president that built a party in 5 months and put us on the map just like that? How does that make sense?
How can they sack a president they elected?
No, how can they should sack a person that has actually made them lose all the votes and move from a 50% to a 40%. That's just the reality. Wouldn't you say? It's underperformance. If you underperform in your role, aren't you supposed to be sacked?
Well,
he's a liability, and
I
that's
was
the
speaking
reality.
to Mahlengi earlier, the spokesperson for the ANC, and she said they don't do that, where there's individual responsibility apportioned, collective responsibility. From the days, by the way, when your founding father, Jacob Zuma, was leader of the ANC, that's always been their principle, that they take collective responsibility. So what would you put on the table that would force them to deviate from that?
President Zuma left an ESCOM that never owed 160 billion rand. President Zuma left a country that had lights. President Zuma left a country that
already load shedding, not as intense, but there was
no load shedding.
There was load shedding.
President Zuma ended
No,
load
he did
shedding.
not.
Yes,
there
he
was
did.
still load shedding, Nhlamulo. Let's not be
we had a
dishonest.
good 3 years with no load shedding. And that's
But
a fact.
When he left
said
in 2017, there had already been load shedding.
well,
not as intense as 2022, 2023, and early 2024, but there was there. It was there.
But we didn't have to unbundle ESCOM.
But there was load shedding.
We didn't have to unbundle
But
ESCOM.
there was load shedding.
There was lights.
You're shifting
There
now.
was lights. No, I'm not shifting. I'm telling you the fact.
There was no load shedding.
I'm saying, no.
You said there was no load shedding.
Here's the reality. You know, if we're going to engage here, let's engage constructively, right? Because I think we're not exactly advancing the position of the listener here. When I refer to the debt, I'm talking is because off the back of how is it that at 85 billion rand and ESCOM in terms of their losses, what they're sitting with, to 160 billion. Why does that jump during Ramaphosa's period, right? At 85 billion, we had lights for a good 3 years. You go and do your research, you'll see. When President Zuma said, I'm stopping load shedding, he stopped load shedding. And there was lights. He left office. There's load shedding. You know why? Because this load shedding is benefiting Ramaphosa's friends in the form of diesel. That's why the jump in terms of the debt that you see. We now moved from 85 billion when President Zuma left it to 160. Now we're being told we need IPPs to get electricity. That can't be. We don't need IPPs. And if you look at the tariff related to that, it's much more expensive to the South African citizen. And that's the reality. So we can't come and create an impression as if, President Zuma left a country that was not functional. No. The country has deteriorated. There's not even trains moving. That's the reality.
Trains weren't moving in some areas 10 years ago already.
That is not true. The reality
in
is...
some areas trains weren't moving 10 years ago.
No, if you look at the contract that was signed with Transnet and the Chinese, listen to me, this is what happened. Today, when this Ramaphosa government had to, maintain them, Pravin Gordhan didn't want to maintain them because, you know what, they were bought under Ramaphosa's era. So why did and he actually had to wait till the last minute to fly to China, which was embarrassing, the fact that, these individuals want to politicize service delivery.
So trains only stopped moving in South Africa post-2017?
Yes, that's true. By the way, we had a vibrant logistics arm, which in the form of Transnet at the time. It functioned, it worked. There were programs. Transnet Invest looked at huge infrastructure and port infrastructure in Africa, investments. What has happened in the past years since he's become president? Nothing. Give me one infrastructure project that we can say is organic and has had an impact in this country. Nothing.
I want to ask you about this now. The reality is the MK is now a big player, right?
Yes. Now we are?
Oh, no, I never denied that.
Oh, thank you. I thought you
Did I start with the denial?
No, well, it seemed as if you were actually underplaying our role. I'm glad you're actually realizing that.
I did not. Welcome to the big time. Unfortunately, this is how it goes.
Well, hey, 5 months later.
This is how it goes, right? It's not always going to be comfortable. I want to ask...
it hasn't been with all the court cases.
Here's what I want to ask you. When you look at the political landscape, let's say you don't become part of a coalition. Earlier in our conversation, for example, one of the things you said is we were not having a conversation that was perhaps best suited for imparting, let's say, information to the viewer, right?
Yes.
How do you become an effective player in the opposition benches if you don't end up as part of a coalition? Because a lot of people in the last 24 hours, when it became clear that MK was doing well, were saying they're not even all that clear on your value proposition, what it is that you stand for, etc.
Look, let's put it this way to you. If people don't want to align with us, we're fine to sit where we are. We'll focus on KZN. We'll use KZN as a template to demonstrate to the country that we are more than capable of running a government. It's fine. Let them continue the way that they want. South Africans will respond again. Come 2026, South Africans are going to respond. And let me tell you, all we have to do is just focus on what we need to do, turn that province around, bring about service delivery, end the sewage that ends up in the ocean, and make it functional and vibrant again.
Right.
It's well positioned in terms of the investment.
So getting the
economic
basics
zone.
right.
So let's get the basics right. If people don't want to engage with us, that's fine. Let them be. But we know what happens with coalitions in this country. We know that we're not mature enough for coalitions, especially with those that have been in the space for the longest time.
What would be...
It's a clear indication that, in actual fact, it will infringe on the people's rights in terms of service delivery. That's
so
the reality.
We're talking about the fact that, for example, MK is not keen on an ANC-led coalition partner, right? In terms of, let's say, if a coalition did come about, are there positions in cabinet that the MK party would say these are absolute trade-offs that you would want? Let's say a ministry that you think an MK person should hold in order for the coalition to work.
Let's start with the following. I said we will engage to form a united front with progressive parties that are like-minded, that want to see change. There's no doubt about that, right? And we're saying the ANC of Ramaphosa it's not the ANC we know. It's bought. If they can't even implement the policies that they have to date, right, and they sit in a book, hence I asked you, what infrastructure, what project have they done? What have they done for people? So we can't engage with them.
When we speak of
we
the
can't
ANC
engage with
Ramaphosa,
that kind of an ANC.
It requires...
we are willing to engage with the ANC in discussions. There's no doubt about that. But okay, continue.
I was going to say, you talk about the ANC of Ramaphosa. Am I right to say in that it's fair to read in that he's not the only problem with the ANC at the moment, so that it would have to change in a far more significant
They
way?
know what we mean by the ANC of Ramaphosa.
What do you mean?
He's a liability to them.
So
and they know it. In actual fact, we have helped them make their decision easier. They've
If
always
he
wanted him out.
goes, all will be well with the ANC.
We'll engage with the ANC, not the ANC of Ramaphosa.
If he goes, all will be well with the ANC.
We'll engage with the ANC, not the ANC of Ramaphosa.
Okay. I wanted to talk to you about something else. Your relationship with the EFF, do you see them as an ally?
Well, look at this, put it this way. The EFF has got, in many areas, policies that are aligned to us. In many areas, we share the same ideology on the issue of land, on the issue of jobs, on the issue of education. Naturally so. On the issue of nationalizing certain assets of the state. Naturally so. So, are they a progressive party? Yes, they're a progressive party. There's no doubt about that. Are they focused on liberating our people? Yes, they want to see that, and organically so. And we stand for the same. So, what's wrong with that?
Okay. So they are an
And the
ally.
same with the IFP.
So you see them as friends.
Well, we see them as people we can work with, yes.
And just lastly, on the issue, I'm going back to coalitions because, that's the big thing that we're expecting post this process. Who's going to make the decisions on how the MK party forges ahead in those discussions?
Well, the leadership of MK will make that decision.
As a collective?
Yes, all decisions are made as a collective, with our president there with his wisdom. We engage as a leadership core, which is similar to what they refer as the NEC. And by the way, in there, we have doctors, we have engineers, we have very smart people, we have also representatives from civil society, in the form of also soldiers and so on and so forth as well. So we engage and we have discussions with the president with the president present, and it's not a dictatorship with the president. We engage in discussion. And any decision that we take as a collective. That's it, nothing more, nothing less.
And going forward, how do you... you made great inroads in KZN, inroads in Mpumalanga as well. You're doing quite well there. How do you then, in the post-election period, grow in some of the other areas?
Well, like I said, we need to demonstrate that we can perform. We need to demonstrate our capability. We said this is going to be a litmus test in terms of how people are viewed. This is a litmus test for them to say, can MK actually do this, right? If you look at our people's mandate, we're very clear in there with the 8 pillars, and the theme is reclaiming. We need to demonstrate that we can implement what we've said we'll implement first and foremost, and have some level of referenceability, which we can then say, this is what we're able to do. You see, that's the nice thing about it. Once you perform here, everything else becomes a domino effect. Naturally so. Because people will start to say, but you know, actually, why did I even vote for this ANC? Why did I even vote for this party? Why did I vote for that party? You know, because I would have seen that, in actual fact, maybe we should move to KZN, it's nicer there.
How much of what the MK stands for, and you credit fairly a great deal to Jacob Zuma's presence as leader of the party, much of that has contributed to your success this week, right? How much of the MK's identity hinges on Jacob Zuma's personality, his history as a politician, and would there be an MK party without him?
Well, how can there be an MK party without him when he's the founder? He's the founder, first and foremost. So let's look at it from, you know, the genesis of this. He's the founder. Remember what happened is that in 1960, when ANC was disbanded, 1961, MK military was formed to take the country back by way of the bullet. This time around, we're saying that this ANC is the same. It's in the same position. It's synonymous with what happened then. You know, they're straitjacketed by virtue of the fact that they bought with this leader of this, and they're unable to implement the policies that ought to liberate our people. We're saying that now, because this ANC cannot function in the way that it ought to be, we will set Mkhonto as a party to win the country by way of the ballot. And this is why we've formed this. So we've also said that this is a spiritual process. You know, President Zuma is one person who's selfless. Yes, he formed Mkhonto Wesizwe for people. Look at the response. It's clear that people want it and we're looking for a solution and an alternative. They've got it now.
Do you think the best thing for our democracy is the sort of democracy where ultimately we're going to an era where none of you as political parties are guaranteed a majority? By that I mean where all of you know that you're always one election away from defeat.
Look, I think what's important for South Africans is as long as political parties deliver and don't politicize, and there's also political will to ensure change, and effect change for South Africans and civil society, the better. If it means that people must not be comfortable in order for that to happen, then so shall it be.
Because the criticism is that the ANC had too much freedom, leeway, in that they didn't have a fierce enough opposition, right? So for 30 years, there were people challenging them, but the outcome and the support was a foregone conclusion. So if all of you are sort of always aware that I've got 51, 52, 53%, and in the next election that could go away, do you think that would help better delivery?
It's important. It's important that happens for South Africans. I mean, people, and here's the biggest issue. When you know, political parties get into government, they forget that, by the way, they are there off the back of people's votes and off the back of people's will. So if they're uncomfortable and people are not happy with them, the better. You know, and in actual fact, we should give more power to the people, you know, maybe even use a parliamentary kind of model, because this, like I said, this constitution is that fly. So where people can just issue a referendum and say, you know what, we don't want you anymore, please go.
We're out of time. Jacob Zuma loves a good time. When he was ANC president, he always enjoyed those rallies after the declaration of the final results. They would gather, there'd be music, there'd be dancing. Will the MK have something similar this year? I mean, you are by far the biggest winners from this election.
Our President Zuma did state that, you know, once we perform well, zophela zonke imbuzi, meaning every single goat in the country will be slaughtered because the people will be happy. But again,
is there a date? Are you going? Is there a date in mind?
Look, not yet.
Will I crack an invite?
Our mind is here. Of course, you'll crack an invite, but our mind is right here on the screen. You know, our mind is on those results and ensuring that we get a very good outcome, and we continue to be vigilant. Obviously, we're not happy with certain glitches. What happened to the 2 hours? Now technicians... And let me share something. Last night, and this is something that maybe is going to be controversial, but yeah, good for you. When I left here, there was someone in the form of the technical team that came to me and said, you know, they were aware at one point that when, you know, the system was switched off, certain things happened.
What are certain things?
Certain things happened when the screen was switched off.
What are certain things?
Exactly, certain things. Now, but what's interesting?
Nhlamulo,
what's interesting
you see,
what's interesting.
And your people are going to say I'm big and showing you, but
no,
you can't say certain things happen and not tell us what certain things are.
Certain things happened when the screens went off.
What are those things?
I don't know, relating to the numbers.
What
but
are
in any case,
are you suggesting the numbers were
so I'm saying to you that this is what I was told.
Are you suggesting the numbers are
Listen to the story first so you can learn something from it.
Kaloku, we're running out of time.
Yes, but then you keep
So let's
interjecting.
get to the point.
I'm getting to the point if you
What
allow
is
me
the
to.
point?
The point here is that the same individual who told me this, I wake up, the screens are off for 2 hours. I'm looking for the same technician. He's not here. And I'm asking him, and he's been pulled in for questioning
By who?
by the police.
On what basis?
Have you not seen what is happening? Have you not seen what the IEC
Do you think
said?
do you think
Have
it's
you not
'cause
seen
do
what
you-
SEP said?
Do you think it's because he spoke to you?
I'm just saying, this is the sequence of events. The man spoke to me about what had happened at one point. I wake up in the morning, the screens are off. The same man I want to actually speak to today is not here.
But I want to hear what the man said
All
to
of a
you.
sudden.
Because in the interest of transparency, guys, because the election is a national
He
thing,
says,
right?
he says there were certain things that were done to the system in terms of numbers when it came to Gauteng. Then, in the past, when apparently at one point the screens happened.
Not in this election.
Not in this election now. But now that now he told me this
What were
before.
those things? Are you ever going to tell me?
Unless you listened. I told you already, you didn't listen.
You said things were done to the screens behind the scenes. What
No,
I
I
said,
said
what
you didn't hear me. I mentioned numbers. You just didn't hear me.
happened? What about the numbers? They were cooked.
I said to you, they said certain things happened to the numbers. What more do you want?
What happened to the numbers?
Ask him. Maybe the police will.
But you are telling me about
But
it,
I'm
so I'm
telling
asking
you, I'm telling you what he told me.
Kaloku, you're my source.
But I'm telling you what my source told you. Told me.
He didn't say certain things. I'm sure you went into more detail.
How? Now, are you my source now?
Nhlamulo, good to speak to you. Nhlamulo Ndhlela from the MK party. Good to talk to you.
Great talking to you too.